I don't care what you look like or what you think. I don't care what you do or where you're from. All I care about is that gift hidden inside you. And all I want to do is help it come alive. Because where we're going, we're going to need a lot of heroes. For the record, 10,000 Heroes is brought to you by Momentum Lab. The point of Momentum Lab is to turn idealists into impactors by aligning your dreams and aspirations with success in every area of your life today. Momentum Lab is like a playground for your highest self. We take your dreams seriously and help you remove any blocks to realizing them. We do this through courses, virtual events, in-person events, and our signature year-long accelerator. To join our world, engage in dialogue, meet up in person, and just blow your mind, sign up at momentumlab.com. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the show 10,000 Heroes. I'm your host, Ankur Ashanti. In this podcast, it's about inspiration, it's about exposure, it's about love and connection. And today I've got this amazing interview for you with Ashanti Branch, who's a guy I met many years ago and just recently saw some of his work. And I was like, hey, I need to get this guy on the show. And I fell in love. I fell in love with him again in this interview the moment it began. I think you will too. But I want to say I'm proud. I tried to ask some tough questions. I know that's not normally my thing, but I went for it. I asked like a question about guns, and a race question, a class question, a gender question to keep him on his toes. But he is just amazing. So, I don't. There's nothing else I really need to say. This is just enjoy. This guy's presence in our lives is a gift. Receive it, and let me know how it affects you. Happy New Year, man. Happy New Year. Dude, I'm so excited. I haven't seen your film. And for years, dude, honestly, I think for over a year, I had it as an open tab in my browser. And I just never had the right time. I've got this kid, I never had the right time to watch it. And I still haven't seen it. But today I watched every other link basically in the bottom of the footer just to get prepped for this call. And dude, I was just blown away, man.
Oh
So beautiful.
man, I appreciate that. Thank you for checking out our stuff.
Yeah. And it gives me really good, my personal culture and habit is not to do a lot of prep or research. That's like
Mhm.
not how I normally roll.
Yeah.
But I just knew. So sometimes I do nothing. But I just knew. I was like, I gotta watch some of this stuff. And it just the first one, the TEDx in Marin.
Oh man.
I was like, oh shit, man.
Oh man. Oh man. That's
Yeah.
the one. That's the I literally uh yeah, that for me was like the first time I had shared it publicly, that story, right? I thought maybe I'll wait till my mom passes and then I'll share this. And I was like, it's haunting me and I can't and I'm trying to protect her while at all odds with my own self.
Yeah.
I think it was a story that I thought I needed to wait till she wasn't here any longer to tell, but it was not serving me, it was not serving me in any good way to keep holding on to that baggage that was baggage, right? Like heavy baggage, right? And it was showing up in so many ways that I didn't even know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask you about that. And I don't know if you want to tell some part of that story or the whole thing. So I'm gonna assume that you don't. But if
No,
you
I mean, I'll share any of it. It's all wherever it goes, and it may be abbreviated version or whatever. But yeah, I mean, there's no, I'm, I mean, there's been more stories revealed since that reveal, so that I can start, so even, yeah, other ones that weren't planned, right? That was like, oh yeah, that's more of my stuff. That's more of my stuff on this list of stuff that I've been carrying along, lugging along.
well, let me get into it a little bit there, because to frame it for the listeners, and there's many ways we could describe or access your work, but
Yeah.
one thread might be around emotional literacy. Is a kind of more like banal way of describing it. But there's a moment in that story where you're in a car and you have a gun
Yeah.
and you're about to do something with that gun, and you have a moment where you can see almost like one of the possible future timelines if you go and do that thing, and you break down in
Yeah.
tears as if that moment had already come true.
Yeah. 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 I had not even touched the gun. Like I had never touched a gun. I was in a paper bag. So my friend gave it to me. Like he was asking me, did I want help from him? So when he handed it to me, in my mind, I just need to hurry and get back to my house. So it's a paper bag, and literally I grabbed the bag. Now, mind you, like I'm a 3.8 student. I'm a nerd. Like I love math. I'm about to be an engineer. I'm about to go to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. I What do I know about? Like I don't even know what to do with this thing. I know what I've seen on movies.
Yeah.
I've never touched one. So it wasn't even like I have a plan, but I'm in my mind, I'm in protection mode. I'm enraged and I'm in like my mom is hurt, right?
Yeah.
Those are the two things that are happening. And so nothing is in that moment, but up until like right when I grab that paper bag and I like turn to get out of the car, I'm parked on the wrong side of the street. Like I'm literally like calling attention to myself already, but I'm already like, I need to see what's happening. And then literally when I grab the bag, all these things are happening because it's happening really fast. And I just was like, oh man, what am I gonna and then it was like I saw the front page of the Tribune. And I was in a newspaper, so I was on the media academy at our school. So I was a photo editor. So
Mm.
it's kind of like I work on the paper and I help create the images for the front page and all. So literally I was like having all these things happening at the moment, like so fast. But I remember just seeing I just saw the front page. I saw myself being marched down the steps by police, and I saw my mom at the back of the steps crying. And I remember just like, this is not going to help anybody. This
Mm.
is not going to, I'm about to throw it all away. Like I've been working hard to like, for these goals. And literally that was the moment where I started just crying, I started bawling. I mean, I literally started like bawling. Like I'm like almost feeling it right now coming back. Like the idea was that I had sacrificed, my mom was pretty strict and whatever. I didn't get to go out to a lot of parties and fun stuff. I went to church every Sunday, like and Thursday and Wednesday, and like I was a janitor on Saturday. So I was like always in church. Like it was definitely it was not in alignment with who I was, but in my mind, I had no tools to navigate what I was feeling because first of all, I wasn't supposed to be feeling what I was feeling anyway.
Yeah.
Like I'm not in my community, there's no room to feel sad or afraid. You better not let people see it if you do. So I was masking it all up, and it was all coming down. It was all coming down, all the anger and all the many of times that this guy had been mean and evil to me and my siblings, all the times that he had been unkind, all the times that my mom was like, call him daddy because she had married him as if I was like somehow
Mm.
some magic that happened that, like how did this happen? How did this title
Yeah.
just all of a sudden get bestowed on someone just because of something you did, you know what I'm saying? And it was a lot. It was a lot of, my mom and I battled a lot, in that senior year of high school, but she was still like the most important person to me. So it was almost like even though somebody for parents, I know parents can, you get mad at your kid, but you ultimately love them so much, right? So the
Yeah.
anger is more of a reaction to like the where the I think the love is happening so in such a big way that you don't want anything to happen. Like people get mad if you run into the street. Like, why are you mad? Like, right? Like, but the anger is almost like the cover up for the love that almost
The
you can't.
fear of like losing the most precious thing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so yeah, so luckily I didn't go into that house. I sat in my car and I cried and I and I lived to tell the story, I lived free to
Yeah.
tell the story of what almost could have been. And so when I see newspaper articles and as a newspaper person who was in journalism, like we would have to read the paper all every day. So like I was watching news articles, every year for 3 years, like, and at the end of the school year, there was always some high school senior in my mind, even now today, right? There's always a kid who just graduated high school, just went off to college. Like, you imagine, like, when I think about this, I think about one thing I was thinking about just recently is the college fraternities and the drinking and hazing situations, and I realized, I mean, these kids are at top colleges. They're intelligent people.
Yeah.
Yet there is this idea that I could drink a 1.75 liter bottle of alcohol by myself and be okay.
Yeah.
It 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 goes so far past the reality of logic that it makes no sense. But you know what? How the power of group can do. The power of gang mentality, of groupthink, right? The power of traditions and the power of wanting to fit in, and the power of wanting to not belonging but fitting in, because somebody in that room had to at some point. I mean, this happens a lot, right? But it's not everyone doesn't end up on the front page of the paper because they've died or they've killed someone. Some people just are hung over for weeks, right? But you imagine how often when these stories happen, you're like, oh man. Like, I think about that, and I think about, like, the power of things that people do in groups that may not be in alignment with their own values, right? Like,
Something really just dropped for me when you said that, when you counterpose those words, belonging and fitting in,
yeah,
and that all the fitting in we're trying to do is from this lack of belonging.
yeah,
Like, if we belonged, we wouldn't have to do those things if we
that's
felt.
right. That's right. And I think that the work when I became a teacher and I really started doing that work, I was like, these kids are amazing. Like, you're so smart. Why are you failing my class? Right. I was just like, I was confused. I mean, all the work I get to do today is a journey of like me leaving engineering to become a teacher was one of those sit in the car and cry moments. Like, it was like, I didn't cry leaving. It was more of like, what did I just do? Did I just do this? Like, I left. It was almost like because I was moving out of my apartment in Walnut Creek, because that's the Bay Area, right? Fancy town, Walnut Creek, right? I lived in Walnut Creek, and then to, like, go back to Oakland because I
Yeah.
could afford, right? I couldn't afford living where I was living before, and I was like, "What did you do? What are you doing? Like, what?" And I think that ultimately my soul knew that I needed to make a shift, right? And I was in my mind just doing it for 2 years. I'm like, I'm gonna go get this out of my system, get this
Mm,
thing out of my system, then I'm going back to be rich, right? Because that was
yeah.
my plan. I had worked out a formula at 16 that I was gonna be rich by
And
45.
you were able to execute it. You were on that track.
I was on the track. I already went to one of the top engineering schools. I'd already graduated. I already started making money. And then something was like, yeah, but I don't really
Okay,
like.
so that's what I want to get into. Obviously, that has to do with purpose and everything we talk about in this podcast. But I love, there's nothing I love more than people crying. And so, like,
Mhm.
these moments of crying in the car,
Yeah.
what I want to get to is, okay, first of all, that moment that we started talking about, was that the
Yeah.
first time that you'd allowed yourself to really cry, or did you have other experiences with taking off the mask?
No, I think it probably, when I think about back to it, I'm like, when was the last time I cried? Like, when was the last time I had permission, or I gave myself permission to cry? Like, I can't remember up until that point the time before that I had cried. Like, and I think that deep down, like, probably the last time I remember tears coming out of my eyes was about to be jumped in a park in middle school. So I'm a senior in high school, it's 12th grade. I'm 17. I would say I was probably in the 7th grade. So, 5 years before. So I was probably 12. Some guys followed me home. They were in the park. They wanted to fight me. I'm not a fighter, right? But one of the guys picked up a rock, and I was like just imagining myself just getting beaten with this rock in the park. And I
Jesus.
started crying, right? So I was like,
Yeah.
we're gonna fight, but I was just crying. They were like, oh, you such a little bitch, blah, 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 blah. And I remember that. I think if I could think about the last time I had cried about something, it was far and few between, but that was not an emotion that had a lot of room in my life. I didn't have there was no space for that. There was no invitation for that. So it was almost like, you don't do it. I mean, even in the comfort of your own home, right? You just don't do it, So I think deep down it was more of an emotion that was kind of foreign, but it was this moment of just kind of like an emotional overload that was
Yeah.
about to erupt in so many ways.
Yeah. And when
Yeah.
you had that moment of catharsis with the drama with your mom and her partner, did your relationship with emotion change then, or did it take some more time?
Yeah, I think it was still just isolated situation. I don't think I definitely wasn't. I mean, I went off to college. I wasn't. Yeah, there was no room for emotions.
Hmm.
And joined a fraternity. I was doing all that. I was thinking I was becoming a man. There was no. Yeah, there was no room for any of that stuff. Like I think.
So when did it happen? Because the whole work that you're doing now
Yeah,
about the mask is
yeah,
really about men, boys
yeah,
and men having access to emotion and how that can
yeah.
liberate people. So when did you get that knowledge?
I mean, that's a great question. I wonder. I mean, I think okay, so um the knowledge I think probably came when I became a teacher, right? So, you know, college graduate, engineer, making money, like leave engineering, become a teacher. I think it was almost like as a teacher, a first year teacher, I was watching young men in my class who were really smart, like really smart, but they weren't able to show how smart they were to people around them. So they bottled it all up. They shut it all down. And so therefore, if you're not showing how smart you are, then how smart you are doesn't get seen by people on the outside. But me as a teacher who was more than just there to teach math,
Yeah,
like I teaching called me. So I was there to teach a subject, but it was more to me than just a math teacher.
sure.
Right. And so I think because I was more than just a math teacher, when I saw students as math students, I saw them as more than just math students.
Yeah, yeah,
I didn't know what I was there for. I remember I thought I was only there for 2 years to get it out of my system because I thought I was going to go back and make money. Because I knew that teaching wasn't going to have me live the lifestyle I wanted to live. But I saw these smart kids failing, and I'm like, wait, what are you doing? You can't fail my class. Like we look alike. Like I love you, brother. I'm here for you. And I
mm,
realized that there was more to it as a teacher because by high school I'd already got my act together. So I didn't know what it felt like as a high schooler to be like disconnected from learning because
hmm,
I always wanted to learn. And I
yeah,
realized that what I was projecting was, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you not doing this work? Like, don't you want something out of your life? Don't you want to go somewhere? Don't you have a big dream? And many of them had never even asked those questions. So
mm,
I was like seeing barriers that were popping up right in front of me as an educator that weren't going to serve any of these students. And those barriers started the deeper work of Ever Forward. So I'm like, you're failing my class, but you're smart and you could do this work if you try, but you're not trying. And then you want to argue with me when I'm giving you a hard time for not doing the work that you're easily capable of doing. What's going on here? And so the Ever Forward started out of this loss because I was also going to be like, I was going to leave. Like I signed up to be a teacher because I thought I was going to give back to my community. I was going to I knew I was going to be broke financially, but I wasn't going to be a failure. Like I didn't sign up to this to be like,
yeah.
I'm a
To be
failure,
broke and a failure, like you're
broke
supposed to be
and
broke and being successful and be like, hey, look at me, I did all this good stuff for the community.
that's
Not that
right.
you failed at being broke.
That you're broke and you're a failure. You just like let's see. How can we just make our life just the opposite of what it was, right? Like
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
what I'm saying? I mean, at least I was at happy hour every weekend as an engineer. I wasn't necessarily happy in the sense of like fully fulfilled, but at least I could go to afford happy hour. Now I can't even really afford happy hour. My friends are going out every weekend. Like, hey, Sean, do you want to come to the city? I'm like, yeah, where y'all going? And they'll be like, name the place. I'm like, yep, can't afford that. I said, I'll meet y'all at the after spot, right? Because
Yeah.
I can't, y'all going to some fancy dinner. I can't do those anymore, right? I had to, my lifestyle changed, and I'm like, and I'm doing a horrible job, and I got smart kids failing my class. And if you're a kind of teacher who thinks, well, look, if you don't do the work, then you're going to fail the class, and it's your problem, then those things don't probably affect you when you go home at night.
Right. Doesn't
But
affect your self-concept.
that's right. That's right.
But
For,
for you,
for me, it was a direct attack on my ability as a teacher, my reason for doing this work, and why did I shift from all of that to this. And I know, in those early days, some kids, one kid will inevitably once a year say something like, you only here for this check, you only here for this money. And I'll be like, let me show you. And I would go over to my desk, and luckily, I was a little bit arrogant in that way. I was like, and I was also like, you're talking smack, you don't know. So I would go get the check stubs. I had my engineering check stubs on the desk because sometimes I had to go look and see, am I dreaming? Did I really leave all of that kind of prestige of a job and honor of being an engineer for a job of a teacher where people tell you that you're noble and you're basically, but they know you're broke, you know what I'm saying? Like there's nobody who was like deceived when you go to some party, like, oh, what do you do? You're like, oh, I'm a teacher. They're like, oh, this guy is doing so well. Like, you know what I'm saying? They know. They're like, oh, okay, okay. And I realized I've had to like, and sometimes I've switched up what I tell people I am. Oh, I'm an engineer. And then you see the glow, and then
Yeah.
but I decided to, become a teacher. And then like, oh, how interesting, right?
Oh my God. I'm just imagining all these conversations I've had with my like Indian uncles, like the elders in the Indian community. Totally like the total confusion, like, what? What? Why are you not, like the totally like, what?
Why? Why you? Yeah, like
Yeah.
why you, right? And I think like who gives up something so that somebody else can have something, right?
Yeah. Okay, but let's go back because you had this insight. These people were failing your class, they were smart, and you realized that they were trying to fit in
Yeah.
and not pay attention to school as a mechanism of attempting to belong. And you had this
Yeah.
name for the mask, right?
Yeah. Well, back then we didn't call it that, but I was seeing it. I was seeing it. I mean, that's what, as I look back, that's what it was. But the mask didn't come out till 2015. This is 2004 when we started the work. It was just me watching behavior in class,
Yeah.
like smart kids, like showing up but it was a mask. It was like, oh, I gotta be cool here. So this is how I can't be, super friendly with the teacher. So even
Yeah.
kids who I really liked, like sometimes would have a meltdown where they'd be like yelling at me and talking smack to me. And I'm a hothead too. So what? Like who you talking to? Who you
Yeah.
talking to like that? You know what I'm saying? And I
Yeah.
realized there was something going on. If I wasn't careful, I'll get sucked into their fray of them trying to posture in front of their friends. And
Mm.
I'm also know that I got a big voice and a big presence and I'm smart and I got crushing ability with my not only my intellect but also with my words that if I'm not careful, I'll be acting like a 12-year-old on the
Mm.
playground because I got some kid who's talking smack to me, and I'm like,
And
okay,
you're gonna be the man in that interaction and dominate.
I'm gonna dominate, but ultimately I'm gonna lose. I'm gonna lose that kid. I'm gonna lose the ability to really support that kid. I'm gonna lose that young man or a student and whoever it was, um, and then realizing that I also was gonna create a different kind of reaction from other students who were like, well, why did Mr. Branch just lose it like that, right? Like, and I realized I was like, okay. What's going on with me? Well, I'm actually sad that they are failing my class, but like that fear, I'm afraid of what it's going to look like for something to happen for them not to do well in this class. I have fear, and so that fear and that sadness and that worry started coming out as anger because I'm like, why are you throwing your education away? And then I realized I had to back up another step because I'm like, what am I missing? Like what could I do? Because I literally after my first year, I was gonna leave in teaching. Like I was like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. So this is the part that's like the unexpected genius part to me. Because in my journey and many other journeys that I know about, there needs to be a teacher like Marshall Rosenberg, nonviolent communication, or a therapist or someone who's like, hey man, have you heard about emotions? But you had these reactions. You're like almost these like verbal fights with these kids,
Yeah.
and just through that repetitive practice, you became aware of like your emotional needs and feelings and how that was affecting your behavior.
Yeah, but even not even quite there. Like yes, and like I was confused as to why I had these smart young like by the time I taught freshman math, so algebra. Now I took algebra um basically in I forgot what grade it was, but I doubled up on when I had math algebra because I had to walk to the high school take geometry after school because the only way I could get ahead in order to get calculus by the time I graduated high school was to take geometry. My
Yeah, I did the
part of
same thing. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, and I literally had to walk to the high school. So I was confused as to why these kids were freshmen and like no one had like found the fire in them. Now I knew that everybody wasn't on fire in my high school, but I was like, you're brilliant. Like I'm talking about like kids who could do the work if they just tried, but are resisting it. And so what I was realizing that before I even got to the emotion part, I was like struggling intellectually. Like, what is going on here? And it wasn't until we started having those first meetings at Ever Forward that I realized that, oh, here's what's going on. So let me tell you that piece. So here's why the emotion started coming up, because at first it was more just cognitive dissonance. Like, why in the world would a smart kid be failing a class that they can easily pass? It really made very little sense to me. And a teacher who cares about you, like I'm not talking about one of these teachers who don't like you. Like I'm not in this job for this job. I'm in this job to help you have a better life. So if you got a teacher who cares about you, you got a person who has been from the community you're from, who wants you to be successful, and then you still fight against it. Because one thing if you have a teacher who doesn't like you and who treats you like crap, and then you're like, well, I'm not going to do no work for this teacher because this teacher treats me like crap. I've seen kids do that. But I'm talking about a teacher who is like there for you. I couldn't understand that part, right? Because I came to teaching for them. And I think that I was missing it. So what happened is I said, look, I thought after I taught for a few years, I would then start some kind of program or whatever. I had it in my mind that there was this club that I would start. I thought I would become a good teacher first, maybe, and then start this club, but it couldn't wait. It literally was the first year I started teaching. And I was talking to students all the time because I was doing my master's that year, and I was interviewing students and asking questions like, what am I missing? What am I missing? And that's when I realized that it needed to be something outside of class. In class, they had an image to keep up. I had to talk to them in a separate space, and it couldn't be detention. It couldn't be like, because you have to come see me after school. They think they're in trouble, and they're like, man, I got something to do after school. Like, no, I really don't want to talk to you. Right. And I've done home visits where I show up at people's house, and then you're like, well, the scrutiny is on them because they think their parents think they're in trouble. So you're like, no, he's not in trouble. I just want to talk to him. Right. And they're like, why does the teacher want to talk to you? Like, so I think all the pressure of like, how do you create a space? So I invited some young men to lunch. I said, look, I'll buy you lunch. And the concept of Ever Forward was like, I'll buy you lunch once a week. Now, they couldn't leave campus, so it was a closed campus, so they had to eat on campus or bring their own lunch. So they would get food brought in every week. But in exchange for lunch, like, you're going to teach me how to be a better teacher. Because what I considered is that I was failing. I didn't blame them for failing, and in moments, yes, but like I blame myself that somehow I'm not doing enough to like connect to the right dots for those students so they could be successful. And then that's how the Ever Forward Club started. It started with these lunchtime meetings. In these lunch meetings, we would just eat and we would talk, like check-ins, how you doing? And everyone would go around, and I began to realize it from them. And I'll come back to this other activity I did before, but it began to learn from them that it wasn't about the school. It wasn't about not the ability to do the work. Life was hitting them in so many ways that you don't get any credit for being a sibling who takes care of other kids, or you're helping take care of your parents, or you translate for your parents, or you're feeling the pressure overwhelming of like trying to like live up to an expectation of family who you never live up to, and all the hurt and trauma and all the other things that these young men were dealing with, that as a math teacher, I would never know that. There's no place in school where you would know what kids are going through outside of academics.
Yeah.
Because schools, definitely in 2004, were all about, if you're not doing good academically, then you're a horrible student, and therefore we don't have anything really for you. We don't have anything to do with you. And it was a lot of that. And so I realized that I needed to create that space. And that's what the Ever Forward Club became. And it became a place for me also to realize how much masking I was doing. Now, for me, my academic journey was different because I buried myself into school because home was such a mess.
Yeah.
Like, I left my house as early as I possibly could without causing any trouble. I came home as late as I possibly could without getting in any trouble. So I buried myself into learning. I was in the media academy. Mr. O'Donoghue, Mr. OD was always there like 6 a.m. I got there some days right after he got there, 7 o'clock. I was always there early. So it was a way for me to bury myself into school. And so learning, doing good in school became the way that I was able to ignore. I masked the stuff that was happening at home because I just got from a student. Some kids can't mask all that. So therefore, if stuff is going rough in their life, it comes out through them, but they may not come out as they're walking around like showing the trauma, but they're showing in other ways.
We have different coping mechanisms, you know,
That's right.
and your coping mechanism was socially acceptable
Yeah,
and like really was conducive to you hitting your long-term goals.
that's
Where
right.
like another coping mechanism would be to find a sense of belonging in like on the street or a gang or something else that
Or
is
just
probably effective at coping, but then has
oh
these other
yeah,
like downstream negative consequences.
absolutely. And if you don't have any dreams outside of what you're at right now, then you see it as just normal. I'm just living day to day. I'm just gonna get a job. I don't need all this education nonsense, right? Like I don't need this. What am I gonna need parabolas for? What am I gonna need graphing lines for in my life? What am I ever? And I used to tell students, look, you don't have to like math. I don't care if you don't like math. I could care less whether you like math. I love math, but you need to know how to solve problems. This is a class about solving problems. And if you don't learn how to solve problems now, they will catch up with you. It doesn't every problem you're going to get in life you're going to be able to solve, or you're going to know the right formula to fix it right away, but it won't be as fast as solving for X. But
Yeah.
sometimes you're going to be solving this problem for a long time. But
Yeah.
if you don't even have a way of like navigating, what do I have? What am I given? What do I got to work with? What are the unknowns? What are some possible strategies I can try? Oh, I may have to just do this and redo this problem again, right? And I think like, how do we help students not, because I've seen people say, well, you need this because it's going to help you get into college. What if you don't like? What if you're not going to college? What if you're not going? What if you're not taking the SAT? Why would I tell you? So knowing how to connect to students and telling them that their education is the only way they can possibly be successful, when there's plenty of people with GEDs who are millionaires, right? Plenty of people who didn't graduate high school or didn't go to college who do well. So those kind of arguments don't work for kids who are smart enough to know that you're talking smack and you're just trying to make them do what they don't want to do. And in my context was like, I don't care if you don't like this class, but my expectation is you will show respect because I give respect to you. My expectation is that you will give your best. My expectation is that, hey, if you need help, you can ask for help. And I think I began to set expectations in a class, but in this club, it became a brotherhood. It became a place where young men could take off those, like talk about what they were going through in a healthy way, as opposed to like letting it just erupt in other ways.
Yeah. So talk about solving problems. You get these people together who they're coming from a certain community of how they relate to each other and how they relate to their own emotions. How did you solve the problem of making it okay in that space for them to share what they normally wouldn't be kind of dead sharing with each other?
Yeah. Well, at first it was food. First it was just food. First it was like, I think some of them had to test the water. Some were looking for something like that. Some were like, what the heck is this? Right. So you imagine if you were a kid who never got to talk about what was going on in your life, but you really wanted to, when somebody gave you that space,
you're like, boom, thank you. Just like,
it's just, it's like
the
falls, right?
Yeah.
And for some, they're like, man, people are talking about real stuff in here. And we just had to start the place by, this is a confidential space. We're going to come together. We're going to have lunch. We're going to build a community together. We're going to be a brotherhood. It was really context around, I joined a fraternity in college, but my fraternity, we never talked about real stuff. So I told them that this is a brotherhood and it has to be a safe place. Like no one was using the word safe space in 2004 in my work. So I was like, look, if whatever happens in this space has to stay here. And you got to like know that you can talk about stuff that's going on, but we're just going to have lunch and we're going to talk and we're going to check in. And so it really just started kind of organically, because I didn't even have a place like that for myself. So it wasn't like I knew what I was doing. It wasn't like I didn't join my own men's team till 2010, 6 years later. I didn't even know there was a place for men to do that kind of stuff. I had never seen it happen. There was never a man in my life who was emotionally present really in that way. And so I realized that what I was actually building subconsciously was what I actually really needed when I was their age. I was building a space.
Yeah. And what you needed even then.
What I needed right then. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
I ended up in the hospital to figure that part out, right?
In the hospital?
Well, that teaching is a hard job, like especially when you're giving so much, So yeah, so Everforest started in 2004 in the spring. 2005, 2006. I think it was 2006. We're like we're an organization, but we're not an official nonprofit. We're trying to figure out how we're going to do these events. I'm buying lunch. I remember I left engineering without really a plan. It wasn't a strategy. I pretty much wiped through my savings in that first year buying lunch for teenage boys every week. It's like 40 weeks a year. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot of. I mean, it wasn't a strategy. It wasn't a business plan. It wasn't a strategic plan. It was the heart of my work was trying to figure out how do I make this work. And so I was going through it. I mean, I was overextended financially, emotionally. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was willing. I knew it was working, and the club started growing. And then, literally, 2000, I think it was 2006. Or maybe it was 2006. I think it was. Like I'm like one day coming to work, my leg is hurting, feel a little pain, and in my math class, I realized that I needed to like modify the lesson that day, so we did a circle that day, and I think it was one of the periods. One of my I have a IWE, they call it a student worker, and we're in the circle, and I'm feeling myself about to just like pass out. Like I don't know what's going on. I don't know. I'm not feel sick, but I'm feeling something. I'm feeling like faint. And I told my IWE, I said, come here. I said, call the main office and tell them to call an ambulance. I'm about to pass out. He's like, what? I said, just keep it quiet. Go to the, and I'm trying to figure out what do I do with the students? And so basically I turned the lights on. We were having a circle, right? And we finished the circle. And I'm like, what I'm doing in the circle is students are going around there checking in with each other. They were doing this big circle. This is in math class because and before we were doing this stuff, but in my class also we created this space that was a healthy space. And so what I was doing in these circles every week with these young men is I was taking their stuff and holding it for them. Here's what I think. If I look back energetically, here's what I think I was doing. Yeah. I was carrying all the stuff they were handing me with them and for them. But I hadn't have a place where I was like letting go of not only their stuff, but also letting go of my own stuff, of working a job that I felt really passionate about, but not making the kind of money that I think that would let me live, trying to like support this organization that financially I was like, how am I going to keep this going? Because like there's no more in the bank. I've already spent any of the savings I have from engineering. Like all these things were coming in my mind. Like, how do I, like, I'm failing again. I'm failing at this. Right. And so I told the class, hey, everyone, y'all go outside, wait outside. Because in my room was like by the handball courts. And there were some benches outside. And I never let kids leave early. Like even when the bell rang, the rule was the bell doesn't release you, I do. So when I told them to go outside early, they were like tripping, like, what? Trying to set us up. I said, no, everyone grab your stuff. I want you to go stand outside. When the bell rings, then you go to class, but stay out there and kind of be quiet. And so a couple of kids who really knew me were like, Branch, what's going on? I said, nothing. Go ahead. Just go outside. Go outside. Wait outside. I'm like, now I'm getting a little bit more forceful because I feel myself like losing it. I feel myself passing out.
Oh my gosh.
So they finally all get out. My IWE is in there. I said, hey, just hang out there with them and let me know when the security comes. And I lay on this beanbag in my classroom, and literally I was about to be gone. And literally I remember students like, what's up with Branch? What's going on with Branch? Right? Because it wasn't like me to let kids out early, even like 7-10 minutes early, to stand outside and just hang out. Like hanging out. We work in this class, So anyway, that was what happened. And so I ended up in the hospital, and it was, I think I don't know what they didn't, they did all these tests. They don't know what it was. I think it was just overwhelming.
They didn't find the energy that you had taken from the students in all those tests.
No, they didn't find it. They didn't find that. They didn't find the luggages that I was carrying. Like, I mean, it was heavy. I think that deep down, if I look back, I'm like, I had I didn't know knowledge of releasing. I didn't know knowledge of what energy in that way. I just was trying to give my best to these young people, these young men, and the students in my classes. And I cared a lot. I don't know. I cared more than I think they did. And I had to tell them, I said, look, I can't really care more about you than you care about yourself, but I'm going to do my best. But you got to meet me somewhere because like I'm watching you throw it all away. And I think that to like take this job serious, it takes a toll. It can take a toll if you're not careful. And I think I didn't know about giving half. I didn't know about like having a student who was not doing well, who you could tell, and then be like, well, sucks to be them. And I would give them speeches all the time about, look, this is when you turn 30, you're gonna look back at your life and you're gonna be like, no one ever tried to help me. And you're gonna be like, oh, yeah, Mr. Branch tried, but like I was like painting a picture for them what would happen if they were adults and had not taken advantage of their education. And I think that I wanted them to see that there was more out there in the world. And I think that if I hadn't seen it myself, if I hadn't become an engineer and then realized that I could make a choice, some people don't get to choose a career because they're limited.
Yeah.
I chose a career and I left that to do this other thing that I felt was calling me, and that's the work. That's been the work for 2004 before it started, and then now we're 19 years later.
Yeah. So I'm curious, man, like what you learned from that hospital incident. You're still doing a similar work now where are you just like an administrator now, or are you actually still meeting with the kids?
No, there's one club we run right here in Oakland, and I do a lot of workshops. I do a lot of
Yeah.
training workshops, but I have a men's team now, so I am not. I don't have to carry it all myself, right?
Yeah.
I have a
Yeah.
place every week that I get to go, and the stuff I'm carrying, and I've learned how to navigate how much of it I hold, right? As opposed to, like if the kids are telling me what they're going through, and I'm like holding space for them, like I need to be careful that I'm just holding the space. I'm not holding the stuff.
Mm.
Because easily all night I can be like wondering, worrying, like if I'm not careful. So how do I hold space instead of holding all of their stuff?
Yeah.
Feeling like I have nowhere to deal with it. Well, no, I held it in that space right there. And
So how do
so
you do that? How do you hold the space without holding on to the stuff, the trauma?
that's a great question. I don't know that I have a actual ritual of how to do it. I think it's more of like if I were to ask you how you're doing and you said fine, my students know that my very next question is what's fine. That's what it is. And so because I'm going to ask you a real question and you are hopefully when you trust me, you'll give me a real answer. Then if you tell me that XYZ is happening, I could have taken fine and be like, okay, keep it moving. That was easy. Oh, how you doing? You doing fine? Okay, good. How you doing? And I can keep doing that all day long, and I can carry all the fines and all the okays and all that. But if I really think that something else is happening, and I ask you, and you're willing to tell me, then my job is to like just look at you, hear the words, let them wash over me, but not let them stick in me. And even when they're the hard ones, like okay, so tell me how can I support you? Is there anything I can do for you? And when that student says, no, not really, I don't know what you could do, I said, well, if you need me, then I'm here. As opposed to me, and that means I have given them my best. I've offered if they say, well, maybe you could help check in with me, or maybe you could XYZ, then okay, then I can help with those things. As opposed to me taking their story and being like, okay, let me hold this for you. And then like not energetically releasing it back to them because it's ultimately their problem to navigate. It's their life to solve. I mean, even though they're teenagers, it's their life. So my job is to, okay, this is what you gave me. Here's what I heard. Let me give it back to you. And how can I support you to make it better? What are the things I can do for you it doesn't weigh you down? What ways that I can offer? Who connections can I put you in touch with? What resources do you need? So that I have now not taken the stuff and said, I'll hold this for you. I have said, yes, thank you for sharing this with me.
Mm.
Now that you share this with me, what support could I offer you? And when we do it in a circle, then my job is to ask the circle, who has been through this before? And then they get to say, oh, I've been through something like this before. Is there any wisdom that you can offer? Is there any ideas or thoughts? And therefore, as a collective, as opposed to me, because I care and I have a big heart, wanting to care about everybody, it's not possible. It's not doable. And I found that it wasn't sustainable. So I think I do it in lots of different ways, but it definitely, there's no ritual. There's no, official ritual. It's more of, I've learned that, I mean, I carry the stories with me. The stories are with me, but I'm not carrying the baggage with me. And that is, when I leave a workshop and when we do a workshop with students, whether I'm doing a workshop with 800 or with 8, like I'm holding space for them. And when I leave that workshop, I'm wiped out. Like sometimes I'm like, after a workshop is over, I'm like, I'm still buzzing a lot, right? Because students have said some real stuff, and I've looked every one of them as many as I could in their eyes, right? Yeah. And then I need to like release it, because if I don't, then I'm gonna carry all that stuff because I deeply care. It's almost like my father wound is one of those things I wish I could like turn off, right? Like my father died before I was born, so I didn't really find out about the story about my father until between 2012 and 14, a little bit about how and all these other stories that were connected to my father's death. But I mean, I knew how he died when I was 11, but how, like when I learned the story of the Branch family, I didn't even know the Branch family until 2012. I didn't even know the extended father side of my family until 2012. So imagine my whole life, I'm just carrying the wounding of him being gone and not having any deep connection to who Branch is, just the name.
Could I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
So this is related to that podcast I did with Stephen Jenkinson, which you said you listened to a couple times. The guy with the hat.
Yeah.
Do he has this vocabulary of kind of what do we owe our ancestors?
Yeah.
How do you relate to that question with your dad or anyone on that side?
I relate with a deep emptiness of belonging. And we talked about that belonging again, right? Like my Oakland, the branches I knew in Oakland, my cousins, I just felt like, is this all? This is all? Like this is all the Branch line has for me in the life? Like I was really confused. Like all I had was like my 5 or 6 cousins here, and I like wanted so much. I wanted so much in life. Like my grandmother was here when she was still living, and she was the matriarch. She had kind of blocked the gate for me. I was the youngest grandson to meet the Branches. She like blocked it. She knew them. She people would call her. They would send her cards. She blocked it for me to meet them for whatever reason. And I think when I think about the ancestors, all the other branches in my life, like I knew her and my grandmother, and I knew my grandmother's family, but she never let me meet the branches. And I don't know if she even knew that it was important to me, even though I would ask. And when I was young, it was like the grandma was like, go outside and play. Stop asking so many questions. Get out of grown folks' business is what she would say. I'm like, but this is my business. So literally, it wasn't until 2000, my grandmother turned 80. She turned 80? She turned 90. She was about to, I'm trying to think, no, I can't think of the years. I can't get them all right. But I remember asking her, she started getting older and I started noticing, and I was like, grandmother, you got to tell me about my family. Like, you got to tell me what's going on. And so I think that I need to know this. Like I need to know who I am. Like I want to, you got to tell me what you know so that I can know. And literally a couple of weeks after I interviewed her, she said, hey, you got some mail at my house. Now, a lot of my cousins got mail at her house, but I never got mail at her house. I'm like, I ain't got no mail at your house. What are you talking about? She's like, get on over here and come get this mail. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Right. So I go to her house. There's a letter. It's from David Branch, Esquire. Like he's a lawyer. And I was like, what is it? She's like, go and take it with you. Go read it somewhere else. It was almost, my grandma was like that. She was really like rough. Like she was loving, and she was always like, go read it somewhere else. I'm like, I just came to see you. What are you talking about? She's like, no, you just came to get this letter. Get the letter, then go. And literally I go to the gym, and before I get in the gym, I'm gonna open the letter. And it was like, hello, cousin Ashanti. We've been looking for you. And it's almost like a movie. It's almost like as I replayed it, what happened in that car, I was like, what? And there was a family reunion that year, maybe a month, 2 months away. They said, we want to invite you to the family reunion. We've been looking for you. Like the branch leg of my father and my grandfather had no representatives at the family reunion for almost ever. And I was like, what the heck is going on here? And literally, it's a letter that I'll never forget. But it was where the opening of meeting and knowing about my own ancestral roots from my father's side, and meeting this big family of people who are doing amazing stuff in the world. It's almost like if you live in a city where no one in your family has ever done anything positive, you could easily believe that you're destined to be like that. Now, my mom, I knew my mom's side of the family. So they were positive people. Like they gave me energy to strive for better and to believe in a higher power and believe in God. And they set me up for believing in something. So I didn't have nothing, but imagine if you didn't ever have anybody who ever said, we see something in you. We expect you to give your best. I didn't know my mom went to college until I was a sophomore in high school. And I was trying to join a program called Upward Bound, which is for first generation college students. And the lady told me, oh, you have a really nice application, but you don't qualify. I'm like, you're talking about, I'm going to college. She's like, well, you gotta be first generation. I was like, I am first generation. We're poor. And she was like, but no, but your mom's a teacher. So she had to go to college. And I'm like, you mean my mom went to college for us to be this broke? How is that possible? I was
Oh, that
clear
adds a whole other dimension to you, like leaving engineering to
and
teach.
becoming a teacher. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was almost like what I had told myself at 15 years old that I would never, ever, ever, ever do is be a teacher. If we're this broke, and that was what you go to college to be this broke, and you barely can. I got holes in my shoes walking down the halls in rainy days. You know what I'm saying? Like, what the heck is going on here? And I realized that when teaching called me, I tried to run from it. I mean, literally, I didn't go easily. Those days of like that, I was mentioning about crying in the car. It was more like, why did you do this to yourself? Right? Because it was a fight. It was an emotional fight. It wasn't a fight of my heart wanting to do it. It was my fight of my head saying, what's going to happen to our dream of the lifestyle we want to live? That was in the way.
Wow. I want to shift gears just a little bit to go more into the mask and the idea. So I want to share an impression I have that I think is probably going to be wrong. I hope it's wrong in a way. I hope it's controversial and you react to it. Is the Ever Forward Club just another college prep program?
Yeah, no. It definitely isn't. And I think that even people, when they've asked me that, like along the journey, people have said, "Oh, you're a college prep club." I'm like, "Oh, no. We like, look, the reason Ever Forward Club started was for kids who didn't want to be.
But in these videos, I see you're advertising the statistics about how they all graduate from high school, and then 90% of them go to college, and these are the colleges they go to. That's how I don't know if you're fundraising or that's how you're communicating about it.
Yeah, it was unplanned. It's not the goal. And I would never. And when people try and tell us we should be like, oh, we're a college prep club, we're like, no. Like I fought against that for years, and I've had to keep fighting against that because here's what I know. And here's a challenge with philanthropy. Philanthropy, at some levels, would say, "Well, if you're not a college prep club, what are you doing? You just an organization having fun with kids. Well, why would we invest in that?"
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge with that type of thinking would say that all kids need to go to college. One, two, that college is the only way to have a lifestyle that it could be second to none.
Mm-hmm.
For happiness, for well-being, for joy. Now, I went to college. I want all of my young men to go to college. I want them to have our chance at a lifestyle that is second to none. But I also know that there's other ways. There may be military, maybe trade school, maybe entrepreneurship. There may be trade schools, right? Like, and so I didn't design it with the idea of let me get every kid to college because look, if you don't even want to be in high school, how am I going to get you to show up to a club where we're like, hey, let's get you some more education after this education that you don't even want right now. Like what
yeah, like, I mean, so that's really what I love because I saw the videos and you could be like, oh, given the results, one might assume it's a college prep program and that you were teaching them study skills. But actually what you were doing from my perspective is you're teaching them this emotional awareness. You're giving them space to get into their heart.
Yeah.
You're giving them an opportunity to figure out what their passion is, and you're letting that passion drive whatever else they do, which a lot of the time might be getting more education.
That's right.
It's like an emotional route in instead of like, now you're going to take a test right in.
It is how about we find what brings you alive? There's a quote by Howard Thurman that says, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do that. Because what the world needs is more people who have come alive. And so what Ever Forward was trying to do with those young men in that club was like, what do you like to do? What do you do for fun? You don't know what you do for fun? Okay, we got to work on that. Okay, what do you like to do? Oh, you don't know what you like to do? Okay, we got to work on that. Oh, just video games? Nah, that's not going to work. We're not playing video games. Like, what are the things you like to do that we can create experiences for you to experience? So what happened was when we started taking kids on the college trips, some of the young men in that first couple of clubs, some were doing good academically, but they were needed some social skills. Some were doing horrible academically and they had too many social skills. So we were almost like in the mix of balancing out those two things, those students who were super social and those who were not so social, but there was a mixture. So my job was like be matchmaker in terms of, hey, when we do check-ins, we check in about how we're doing in these classes. We were matching those young people up. But when we went on our first college trip, I had to battle so many teachers because I got kids who are getting a 1.0 who are going to take away 3-4 days from school and the teachers don't want to let them go. And I'm like, well, look, here's two things. He's a part of this club. He needs to go on this trip. 1, 2, he's already fell in your class anyway. So what is 4 more days going to do? You know what I'm saying? Like the idea is that if you don't really like the kid anyway, so why are you restricting him from going? I'm giving you 4 days of freedom from this kid who you don't really like.
And the idea that like the low probability but potential upside is that he's going to get so inspired and be like, oh shit, I can actually do this, that then he's actually going to apply himself and use his brilliance.
That's right.
And not be a pain in the ass for that teacher later.
That's right. That was a sell. That was a sale. I had to sell all that.
Yeah.
But I also had to sell the idea that if we're going to transform how they see the world, we have to let them see a different world. We can't have them stuck here in the concrete jungle of San Lorenzo, which is the school where Everett Ford started, which is right next to Oakland. Like, we can't like have them stuck in the concrete jungle and say, reach for the stars, when all you've seen is a concrete jungle every morning you wake up where people don't like each other. People are fighting all the time. There's violence. There's disconnection. How would you see a world bigger? If no one in your family has ever escaped this jungle either, how do you make it better? And even if somebody had, my mom had escaped the jungle, but she escaped, she went off to college. We didn't talk about college in my house. I didn't know she went to college till I was 15. But like in my mind, back, she was planting seeds. She was planting seeds of just like giving your best, trying new things, willing to fail and keep moving, right? And I think what I try to do for those young men was like, you are going somewhere in life. I don't know where you're going, but let's begin to add some value. Let's add some tools in the toolbox. So when we went off to these colleges, for them to see kids in college, we mostly went to Southern California. I mean, we didn't go that far, but for some of them who had never left their city, to be in another city and you're like, oh my God, there's a college campus. I want to come to something like this. There's a bowling alley here. Oh my God,
amazing.
look at the cafeteria. Look at this buffet. You get a buffet every meal. Yes, this is every meal. You come in here and you choose what you want. Like the idea of some of the things that are so big for some people who have never seen it.
Yeah.
Transforms you,
Yeah, no, for sure, man. Oh, it's amazing. I love that vision. I mean, even for me, and I didn't grow up rich, but I didn't grow up with any lack. But I remember going to Stanford and to the dorm and the buffet. And at that dorm, it was Florence Moore Hall, and the woman who endowed it, she has a law, like a rule that you have to serve ice cream at every meal. And I remember being like, this is I mean, it just blew my mind, right? Like, this is heaven. Yeah. Oh God.
And you can have it before your dinner.
Anytime you want. You can have it for breakfast.
Anytime you want that. And imagine the world that gets bigger like that.
Yeah.
Now, whether you decide to go to that school or not, right? Like, we always went to Cal Poly because that was my subliminal messaging that you're going to go to this. One of you going to go here eventually. But it was more of like, plant the seeds and I can't grow a plant. Like, I can't grow a crop. My job is to plant and then water and then nurture and then harvest. Like that's my job. So if I don't plant seeds, how do I dare think that there's somehow going to be a harvest coming from you? And so my job was always about, we're planting seeds. And no matter what your GPA is, now they had some responsibilities they have to take care of. Like, you weren't going to just be goofing off and then get to go on the trip. It was more of you earned it. But to tell a teacher to say, well, he's doing bad in my class, so he shouldn't go on a trip, was the reverse logic. And I had to always battle for the students. I'm like, that's not going to work. That doesn't work here. That's not reality. And that doesn't do any good for the future of not only that young person, but for the work that we're trying to do in the world,
Yeah. Okay. Another question related to that in these videos I saw this morning. So there was one where you brought four gentlemen from your school or from one of the schools to some big event, right?
Wisdom 2.0.
Wisdom 2.0.
Yeah.
And so there's a race and a class thing going on here that I'm curious about. And I'm not from the DEI woke world, but my wife works in it, so I know a little bit about it. So here's the thing I want to present to you. You got these four gentlemen, three
Yeah.
of them black, one of them Latino, as far as I could tell.
Yep.
I don't know how they identify.
Yeah.
And then this audience, and like the video shows and the audience is just all old white people. Right. And I was just like, all right. I mean, obviously the work you're doing is just amazing. I'm super stoked about it. And I had this thought, like, is part of being successful for kids from Oakland just learning how to relate to the way that old white people expect them to be? Is that like, and I could imagine some sort of like, I don't know, postmodern left critique being like, what you're doing is actually bad for the kids because you're just teaching them to be the people that old white people want them to be.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if what comes up for you around that.
Yeah. So great question. My role in not only that conference, but my role in Ever Forward is to help our young men see a world different than their own. So these young men got to go to this conference. It was at the Innovation Hangar, which is in the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Golden Gate Bridge. So a lot of our students had never been to the Palace of Fine Arts. A lot of them had never been to a conference, a big high-tech conference. And so my job in all the ways we engage young men in this work is, how many different ways can I let them see the world as it is that they may not even recognize? And so when I got opportunity to help present, my job was to present the real for them and let people hear the real that they experience. I'm really careful that I'm not here to put on a show for anyone, but I am here to help you in the audience see that there is more to me than you would ever see by just looking at me. There's more to these young men than you could see by looking at them. What you see on the outside, you may already have a judgment before they even speak. You may have a judgment about me with all of this, and you may say, oh, this is what this person is like. This is what he's going to sound like. This is what he's going to talk like. This is what he's going to think about. But you don't know. The same thing, I don't know you. But if we're not careful, we could easily put people in the box. And so my work has always been around, when I take them on college campuses, there's not so many people who look like them. There's definitely students of color in these campuses. Sometimes we got to try and find them and track them down, because some colleges at Cal Poly, it was where I went to school, the Black population is less than 1%. The Latino population is a little higher, but to find a young Black man on that campus, and like, it's sometimes hard. And we're like, hey, you got a minute? Like, can we bug you? Can you come talk to our young men, right? And how do we like let them see people in this sea of, because when I went to college, in my classes, there was no other Black people ever. I don't remember. I'm thinking about if I'm saying that right. Ever was there ever? Maybe once, but in my recollection, I never had a class or another. No, I never had a study group with another Black person in college. I never had another Black person in any one of my classes. If it did, it was once, but definitely I can't even remember it. Now, imagine what I'm seeing. I'm seeing what those young men saw in the audience that day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and if I can't get comfortable being in a space where people don't have to look like me, then I'm going to be stuck being only in places where everyone looks like me. And I think if you went to an HBCU, that was great for some. I know that I didn't want that. Some of my friends went off to HBCUs. I chose not to, because, and I remember having arguments with some of my friends, like that's not the real world. That's what I told them. They're like, but it could be. It's important that, I was like, yeah, I get it, but that's not the journey I'm on right now. The world of engineering, the world of I wanted to go into construction management. I know what that world looks like, and I need to know how to communicate. I need to know how to hear what people are saying, understand. Okay, is this a threat? Am I understanding what the words they're saying? Am I translating it right? So I think it was a lot of that, but I'm always trying to get them to see the world in different ways. Like, in our club, we all pretty much look similar. We're black and brown boys, in our clubs. But when we go and take trips, we go out to, whether we go to San Francisco, whether we go to some business trip at one of the Google headquarters, a trip there, I want them to see different backdrops of the world, and their ability to be successful is going to be how they navigate different worlds that don't may always feel comfortable, but how do you begin to feel like you belong? Because imagine if any of them decide to go to some tech company, that's what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
If any of them decide to go to some law firm, I mean, unless it's an all, people of color law firm, but we know how the world works. And so my job is to prepare them. And so all the things that we got to do, all the things we try and do is always with a behind the scenes vision of preparing them for the world that they're going to walk into, and that will look different than what they may expect, So yeah. I'm all Wisdom 2.0 is a very interesting. Like, we've had a beautiful experience there, but it's definitely a different conference, and so. I was really proud of them. They did a great job. And actually, there's no video footage of their presentation. We did a presentation after that was over. There was a bunch of other students in the audience, but we did a presentation, and they had to lead a circle of adults.
Oh, wow.
Who don't look like them. And they had to find the part of themselves that felt uncomfortable or not confident, and had to tap into their ability to say, you're an expert here. They don't know what we're doing. They don't know our work. You know our work. So you get to be the expert. And like, to let them see that feels like, to be like, oh, they don't know this until I tell them. They don't know me until I let them know. Right.
Yeah. Beautiful, man. All right. So I'm gonna go on a roll with these, because I know we're almost we've been talking for a long time. I'm loving it. I could talk for hours more, but I know we have a time constraint. So I hit you with the race question. I'm gonna hit you with the gender question now.
Okay.
And I want to bring it back to the beginning of this interview, because there's something, I know it's not the reaction I'm supposed to have. When you told the story about the gun and the guy you went to, and he was like, can I help you with this?
Yeah.
Like, the reaction I'm supposed to have is, holy shit, that's fucked up. And I have that reaction. And I also have the reaction of just how beautiful, like, what a great friend. Like, somebody who's willing to risk their future and their life to help you.
Yeah.
To me, I'm like, chills remembering you saying that right now.
Yeah.
And there's something about real masculinity and like real brotherhood and what it means to be a man, to support someone in that way. If we could divorce it from like all the unnecessary violence, it'd be better. But I'm just wondering, like, you've done so much investigation into what people are trying to be as men.
Yeah.
What can we rescue from be a man and masculinity that's actually like positive for us as men? What do we want to mean when we say be a man that's good for us, rather than just throwing it away and being like, it's a totally useless concept?
Yeah. Beautiful question. And I think where my mind goes first is, you see, that's a good one. So growing up, I had lots of different friends who were not on the college track path. So obviously the person I went to was not on the college track path. Like, that was not the person I went to go see. I went to go see a person who knew how to navigate the world that we lived in. Oakland, California, chaos, trauma, violence, challenges. What I knew along the path of my journey, as I look back, like, there were lots of friends who protected me in some ways. Like if a party was about to go left, they would be like, Ashanti, you got to go home. Now, I drove them to the party. So what are you talking about? I got to go home. I'm the driver, right? Because I don't drink and I have a car, and like, no, you got to go. It's about to get crazy. You go home. And I'm like, man, forget that. And like, I would have people send me home to protect me. The next day you find out shooting happened, or like a fight happened. It's, just some craziness happened. And I was thankful for that, looking back, as I look back. In the moment I was like, man, talking about. But here's what I'm clear: that some communities and some experiences you have where people are looking out for you, even when you're not looking out for yourself. Like, I remember now, the first night, a couple of my friends dropped acid. Now, I didn't even know what acid was. I had heard about it, but they were excited about it. And there was these little squares with Mickey Mouses on them that they were super excited because they were going to take it and something was going to happen. Now, I remember when they were passing them all out, and I was like, I better go home. because something inside of me wanted to stay and be a part of this experience. And another part of me was like, my mom will kill me. Right? Because I got to be home by dark. Right. And it was like about to get dark.
Yeah.
And I remember just knowing that if I'm not home by dark, like, so I had this fear of like my mom. And then also like, so there was just like this moment of like, no, I'm going home. I'm going home. Oh, come on, right? And I remember going home. There's another experience where we're in a car with a friend. He came pick me up. We were gonna go just driving around. We had no plans. And a guy came up to the car window with a gun, right? And he was looking for the owner of the car. But knowing the owner wasn't with us, it was the cousin. And my heart was like pounding out of my chest. And I remember like, what the heck just happened? He was like, I mean, I was in the passenger seat, so he was right next to me. And I'm like, my house, I could literally see my house from we're at the gas station. I could see my house because we had just left my house to go get gas to go drive around. And I'm like, I'm going home. I'm like, don't be tripping. Don't worry. Ain't not going to happen. Ain't not going to happen. Stop tripping. Don't worry, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't need much of more of a warning. And so I think as I think about what happened in that car that day, it was a friend who's like, let me help you through this situation. I'm on my way to college. Like I am not that kid. I'm not, but the friend was like, I'll help you through this situation. And I think for me, it was like a moment where I had to be the one to take care of my mom. Like I had to be the one to protect her. I was responsible for her in that moment. To do my best, to do what my uncle said at 7 years old, you're the man of the house, take care of your mom, sister, and brother. Like it was already a decree that was laid on me to be in that role. And even though I didn't know what I was about to do, I didn't know what I was doing, everything in me said my job is to be in protect mode. Now I tried with my physical, I tried with my hands, I thought I was a strong kid. I was a wrestling champion, but the person was way stronger than me. So I'm left to no other resource. I've used everything I got at my disposal. Now I got to do something else. And I think that when I think about masculinity and I think about men and young men, and I think there's a story, I think his name is Richard Cabral. He's an actor, but he was on this show the other day and he was talking about, when he was young, he talks about joining a gang, but he talked about how they had his back. Like he said, look, they had my back. And he said, look, if you're going to ride with me, I'm going to ride with you. And no matter what, and I think that I imagine as much as we know about the terrors of gang life and gangs, and we've seen many documentaries about them and movies about them, at some point along the journey, someone felt like this is where I feel like I belong.
Yeah.
And there's something about knowing, and you may have had to start to act the way to fit in first to become part of the belonging, but there's a way that when you become to feel like you belong somewhere, that you will do sometimes atrocious and sometimes harmful things that you in your own mind would be like, I don't want to be doing this. But there's something about like, I don't have a choice. I'm in the fray, right? I mean,
You have a bond.
I have a bond. I have a bond, or I'm bonded, right? I'm stuck, right?
Yeah.
They helped me with this thing, so now I have to be loyal to them. And even if I'm being told to do something that I deep down don't want, and I think that's what you see that in movie setups, right? Like the kid doesn't want to do this thing, but they got to do this thing. If they don't do this thing, then they're all the ways that it shows up. And I think Father Greg Boyle in his book Tattoos on the Heart talks about this a lot, right? Like the stories of young men who he's worked with over the years who were beautiful in the heart, but who have tattoos all over their face. And when you see them, you may be scary of them, but deep down they're loving, kind, but no one can see it because the mask has created such a shadow over it that you don't even want to make eye contact with them, right? And I think those are so many things that we have to do in our communities of our young men and our community of young men who are, and even men. Like until I joined my men's team in 2010, I didn't know there was a space of men you could trust, that you could trust and talk about your feelings and not be shamed and not feel small or not feel like I'm less than a man. Man, the fact that exists, and I've been there for 12 years, actually now 13 coming up this year, but life-changing. It's been life-changing. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much, man.
Man.
You went there everywhere we wanted to go. You went there. I'm grateful.
Thank you. Thank you for these conversations. And I'm excited. I think as I look at the next phase of ever forward, as I look at my own self and the journey that I've experienced and the journey that I continue to unveil of like the fear, and I get a chance to every day just say, okay, what's next? What's next on this path? What's next for me? What's next for the young people that we get to work with? Like the young men who I see struggle and battle, and to help them find the gold inside of them, right? To help them discover it. It's in them, but help them be on the journey with them, you know? And I think that's a blessing for me to be able to be in that work and continue giving in that way. So, and then, you know, with this movement, the Million Mask Movement, we invite people all over to share their masks, and knowing that, wow, I'm not alone. Wait a minute, other people are going through this too. There's another 12-year-old in the world who's going through this too. There's another 15-year-old, another 20-year-old, another 50-year-old who's going through this too. How's that possible? I thought I was the only one. Well, if we just keep it all nice and smile, and we would think that that's the case. But our newest like image photo campaign is called "There Is More to Me."
Mm.
There's more to you. There's more to us. And anybody can see by just looking at us. And that idea that we can easily get stuck in that, you know. So that's part of the work.
Hi everyone, this is Martin San, producer, editor, and sound designer for the 10,000 Heroes Joe. I just wanted to take a minute to thank our guest for joining us, and also thank you for listening. 10,000 Heroes is brought to you by Momentum Lab. This is the team. Pierre does our artwork, DJ Plainview composed our theme music, and I handle all the editing and sound design. And now, we are closing down this episode with a word from our main sponsor, who also happens to be our host, Ankur.
Hey, everybody. Thanks again for listening. If you like this episode, there's 2 things I want you to do. 1, introduce me to the most inspiring person you know so I can have them on the show. And 2, take the next step towards us hanging out in person. Maybe that's signing up for the newsletter. Maybe that's attending an upcoming in-person or virtual event. What I'm trying to do here is destroy the basic one-to-many nature of this medium, podcast, entertainment, and replace it with something that actually builds connections between people. The beloved community, getting closer together, understanding each other, one conversation at a time. So, join me.